with it, or the fact that people had been saying for years that the South African government was responsible for the downing of this plane. You know, they actually gave a little bit of credence to the idea that there was a decoy VOR, whereas the Margot Commission completely poo-pooed that. So, I mean, I don't know. The other thing that they did do is they couldn't confirm that there was a decoy. But the other thing that they did do is they really threw dirt at the South African government and kind of said maybe they knew something more than they had let on by the fact that it had been confirmed that the South African government had been tracking Michelle's plane prior to the turn, so they had known where it was for quite a while, and they never contacted him to say, A, hey guys, you know you're way off course, or B, hey guys, you're in South African airspace, or C, hey guys, you should stop going down, there's a mountain there.
Well, first of all, they didn't know what the flight's objective was. They didn't, and
it's not their job.
Well, and it crashed. They didn't spend any time in South African airspace to speak of.
I'm in
and it's not their job, like you said. Yeah.
I'm in total agreement with that.
Yeah.
They should have called as soon as they hit South African airspace is just bad to me because it doesn't make any sense. They were literally in South African airspace for, I believe, about 30 seconds. At the speed they were traveling.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot to that. Okay, so now let's get into theories.
Yeah.
And I've got our theories broken up into two sections.
What?
Very simple.
Real or not real?
No.
Oh.
And don't say suicide, because that's not a theory either.
No.
No, the sections are who done it and how.
Okay.
And the who done it section is actually really, really easy because there are so many players involved in the area at the time that anybody could have benefited from taking Michelle out. Mm-hmm. He had already survived several allegedly, I actually should say that, allegedly had survived several assassination attempts in the recent past. The South African government didn't like him because A, he was a socialist. There was also the racial aspect of the apartheid government versus Michelle. There's also Renamo. They would have had the group that was opposed to the government since '76. They had a stake in the game because if they took out the president, maybe they can take out the socialist government or move themselves into positions of power. There's the president of Malawi who didn't like Michelle because Michelle had. The president of Malawi, what this guy had been doing is he'd been doing what a lot of people had. He'd been sheltering Renamo soldiers. Mm-hmm. And as retaliation, Michelle had said, if you keep doing that, I am going to put missiles all along the border of my country, and any of your planes that come into our air shut down a lot of trade for them. Because things were flying in and out of the country. So that guy didn't like him. There's also, he had, so one of the things that you will hear said is that he was going home that day so that the next day he could have a meeting to restructure both the government and the military. Because it turns out socialist systems are notorious for corruption.
What?
And he was one of those few guys that in that kind of regime didn't stand for that. He had evidently gone after people before who were accused of being corrupt.
Interesting.
Either that or he got rid of competitors by accusing them of corruption.
That is a very good point, but I'm going to make him sound much more noble than that and continue to say that he fought corruption in his government. But the point is, those people may have said, no, he is not taking me out of this cush chair that I'm in. I'm taking that plane out.
Yeah, the thing about it is when you're president for life, that sooner or later people, we're just going to keep piling up enemies.
He actually wasn't president for life. That's the interesting thing, but he might as well have. Effectively, he was.
He was in office for 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
There was no democracy. It was socialist. So
there were party elections, but I mean those are easy to rig. I'm not foolish enough to think that they were free elections, but I get where you're going. And the problem with whodunit, it could have been anybody. I mean, it literally could have been anybody because there was things to be benefited or gained by a lot of people.
Yeah.
Even the Ruskies. I'm doubting them the least.
Oh, yeah, no, I really think the Soviets, based on what they did, I would say they probably didn't do it.
Well, I would say that they did interfere to a certain extent by putting out the accusations that the South Africans, and we'll be talking about this, that they duped them into crashing. Mm-hmm. They were definitely stirring the pot in the neighborhood.
There was a lot of stirring the pot.
That was deliberate on their part. I doubt they even believed it, but
Well, let's go ahead and talk about the first theory of how. So this is actually along the lines of what Joe was talking about, which is that the theory is that indeed this was crew error, and it. Actually, this isn't. This is a different one. I apologize from what Joe was saying. This is that it was crew error, and that they did in fact make a mistake with the VOR.
Right, because they were just drunk on vodka.
No. All that was proven wrong. No, that's wrong. That's not where we're at.
You sure?
I'm positive.
I've heard that their autopsies turned up a fair amount of alcohol in their systems, but of course, when your body decomposes,
it was nothing outside of the range of what you would find in a normal decomposing body.
Exactly.
It's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So the official line or belief of the Margot Commission is that the crew had made the error of setting one of their two VOR receivers to the wrong frequency. Maputo uses 112.7 megahertz. Matsafa Airport, which is 120 miles away in Swaziland, uses 112.3 megahertz.
And by the way, for two airports that are kind of close together, I would think they would space them further apart.
Yeah, I really, I looked at that and went, guys, really? Come on.
Yeah.
But the Margot Commission blamed the mistake on the design of the receiver in the airplane, saying that the numbers 3 and 7, the way they were displayed, looked similar. And I'll be honest, I've never seen an image of their VOR receiver, so I can't support that or deny it at all. But I also kind of think that that's maybe the commission having a bit of bias against the way the Russian plane was designed and the Russians themselves, the Soviets.
Maybe. Certainly they were headed in the right direction, but they were looking at that VOR at that airport.
Yeah. Now, well, what they're saying, though, what the Margot Commission is saying is that they were on the wrong frequency. So if you look at the map and the trajectory that they were on, they were actually heading in a pretty straight course to Matsafa. So it's understandable why they came to that conclusion. But if you were listening, you may have noticed that I said that one of their two receivers. This plane had two VOR receivers, and when the investigators looked at the second one, they found that it was set to the correct channel, which was Maputo's signal.
Yeah, but wasn't one of them the backup?
They didn't use them both all the time.
Yeah.
And so it seems that what they had done is they had they picked up their trajectory based off the VOR, or their course, they adjusted, and from there they turned on probably the autopilot, which just had a course heading, and the autopilot took care of the next however long it was, which would have meant that when they made that turn that put them on a heading of 221 degrees, if anybody had happened to look at the backup, they might have realized that they were completely off course.
Yeah.
And so that's where the Margot Commission is saying is that they failed their duties because they picked up the wrong signal and didn't look at the other one or check it again later on.
Yeah, so they've got the autopilot going for a long time, and then when they come off that bearing and turn on the VOR, and they realize, we must have been blown off by a crosswind, blown way off course, and so understandably they made that course adjustment.
And then they turned the autopilot back on. So it's, I don't know.
I guess for me, the fact that they reached out a couple of times to say, like, hey, are your lights on, though? Like, they had questions, right? There was something in them that was saying... They were not completely
negligent.
Yeah, there was something that was in them that was saying, like, okay, but we should be seeing lights. Like, these are the things we should be seeing. Why are we not seeing those things? And as I understand it, they were getting feedback from the tower that was like, no, the lights are on.
Yeah, they were in radio communication.
Like, what do you mean you don't see the lights? Like, if you're where you're supposed to be, you should be seeing the lights.
I think the tower responded to the light question after the second request. They didn't do it right away.
Right, but I mean, they're managing a ton of air traffic, right? You don't expect. But I think, for me, that's where that problem comes in, is if they're being totally negligent, maybe they're being a little lazy.
If you've made this run 100 times.
Right, you're like, whatever, this is the right thing. But if you've made the run 100 times, you know what to look for. And if you're not seeing those things, and you're even like mentioning that you're not seeing those things. It should
set up alarm bells and you should be doing something.
And then when alarm bells that, hey, you're at a weird altitude go off, maybe you should be listening to those things.
And so, by the way, do they have air traffic control in Mozambique, or did they have it in those days?
Yeah.
Were their radars operating?
Were they?
Was anybody tracking their plane besides the South Africans?
I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've never. That's a great question, and I've never actually seen anything that said anything about that. I will mention that there's a lot of controversy over the records of the Maputo air traffic control, because things like their tapes of the conversation are gone.
Yeah.
They were quote unquote lost or disappeared.
Doesn't that happen
they weren't just
so
recorded
often?
over, reused.
Yeah, well, and and I don't know if they were actually saving anything. I doubt that they had the capability at the time to digitally save anything.
No.
So it's not as if today you always see this thing where you can play back the radar to see what the heck was popping up. I don't think they had. I don't know if that technology was available.
Yeah. But as far as audio tapes, you can definitely save those.
Well, they tried. Until they disappeared.
Yeah. Oh well.
They went the way of the dodo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over.
So I don't know about this one.
I don't know.
I have mixed feelings on the crew error.
Yeah, especially
theory.
Since, I mean, it sounds like they realized that something was wrong.
They may not have reacted in time.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
No, I think that no matter how you cut it, even if there was some skullduggery on the part of certain parties, the crew still screwed up.
They may have been a little lax in their reactions, if what you're going at is there. Yeah. So let's talk about skullduggery. Let's talk about the false decoy or false VOR or decoy VOR.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the Soviets in their Minority Report, they said that they had to have been led astray and led into South Africa. And in their Minority Report, they get weirdly specific and say that obviously, and I'm using quotes here, obviously it was built using technology that was provided by the Israeli intelligence agents, intelligence agency, which that's an odd.
The Mossad. Oh, it's the Mossad.
Yeah, it's something about the Mossad. It's a weird thing to slide in there. But yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, at this time, the Soviets were trying to stir the pot everywhere.
True.
Including and the Israelis at that time were allies of the South Africans, and so they were always trying to stir up trouble.
That's a good point.
In the Arab world too. So working Israel, and I can see why they would do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. So from that point on, though, the claims of a decoy or a mobile VOR began to come up and surface. And I did some digging into this with some online sources, and then also by reaching out to some of our experts who I mentioned a little bit before. So I do want to say thank you to Juan, Zach, Kim, and Ronnie.
Hey, thanks, guys.
All of those experts, you guys saw the emails back and forth.
Insane.
And there was some high math in there that I had to work on for a few days, but it made sense, and I couldn't have done it without these folks.
Yeah.
So thank you. This is why we have experts.
That's the thing that I've been noticing a little bit about our experts, though, is they assume we know too much. Like sometimes they'll respond with like a really interesting answer, but you're like, but I need to Google like 5 of these. Sorry.
So I don't know what any of that means. I'm gonna have to take a primer
thank you.
course.
I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But thank you to everybody because
huge thanks.
what that did is it helped me understand better how a VOR worked, and even more so how you could spoof one. So that was really important that you don't find in a lot of the online stuff. Now, in 2003, there was a South African man named Hans Lowe who came forward. He was near the end of his jail sentence, and he was in jail for crimes committed outside of the regime's instructions, which I have to take means he went a little trigger happy.
Yeah, probably.
But he said that he was part of a South African team of special forces that were at the crash site the night of the crash. He was on a backup team. The primary team was running the decoy VOR. He was in a backup team that was there with RPGs with the express intent of, if the plane doesn't crash on its own, it doesn't take the bait, shoot it down.
I don't think an RPG is going to be really any good for taking a plane down. Probably
You mean
SAMs.
maybe like surface to air missiles.
Yeah, surface
Thank
to air
you.
missiles, yeah.
Listen, I've played too many video games and they all go boom.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah, I know. In a video game, I can take an airplane down with a 10 millimeter. It's
Oh,
no
yeah.
big deal.
Oh, yeah.
right?
Actually, we're going to talk about the little things that you can
Yeah.
bring a plane down with, because it's actually kind of scary
that,
how
yeah.
easy it is.
Oh, yeah.
But no, you're right. Surface to air missile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are there with armaments that would take it down if it didn't fall for the trick.
I guess
I don't believe this guy's story, and I don't think I have to do too much to really trot that out, because there's a lot of hearsay about what he has to say, and there are one or two people who came out and said, oh yeah, no, we know the guy who made it, he's telling the truth. But, Hans Lowe also said that he was involved in a device that brought down another plane, and he was also involved in other plane was in 1989. He was also involved in the monitoring of Namibian activists by the name of Anton Lubowski, who was later murdered, and they don't know who killed him. I do have to point out, though, is that, the locals, the ones who said, well, they got chased away from the site, they also said, there was a lot of military activity in this area the days before. But,
Yeah.
it's a remote area of South Africa. South Africa was a pretty militarized nation at that point.
they also supposedly they had a base that was there for a couple of years, so they could have been on exercises.
Yeah. Or they could have been, trying to reinforce their border.
Very possible.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, Michelle had just said, I'm going to put missiles all along my border.
Yeah. And
That
so they
makes
were
them-
probably like, oh, let's go check that out a little bit.
And then there was suspicious activity in terms of there was a really big tent erected on that site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
how
what the
big?
locals say.
How big of a tent?
Really
for
big.
example?
I mean,
Really big.
Like as big as an airplane? As big as a bread box? No.
Just big.
Bigger than your average, troop tent, a big tent.
But we don't know what it is from there.
Was it hiding like Thor's hammer or?
So we're going to move on
Okay.
while you try to find Waldo. Let's circle back a little bit to the VOR and talk a little bit more about that.
Like how it could have been spoofed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is where this is headed.
Because that for me is like way less.
Complicated
Or
out
out of the
unbelievable?
box. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm willing to go there.
So the thing you need to know about the VOR is they tend to be really big. They're big things. Like one of our experts was saying that to make one mobile, or it was an expert or I read somewhere, they said that it would have had to have been on the back of a 3-ton truck, which is basically a semi-truck.
And that's separate from its power supply, correct?
Correct, because they are also super power hungry.
So you got to bring along another truck or two with a generator on it, right?
And if the farther you want to throw its signal, the higher up in the air you need to run the antenna. So you could conceivably need an antenna that's 50, 100, 130 feet tall. I mean, we're talking about a big antenna. These things, though, they're big and bulky, so it's a little weird to think about that, the way that somebody could carry one of those around. But one of the things that the expert Zach pointed out for me is that when you have two VORs broadcasting on the same frequency,
Yeah.
unless one is massively stronger than the other, they might actually cancel each other out.
Well, yeah.
Which then defeats the purpose.
It's also going to, if they're on the same frequency, you would think that they'd be going like, well, VOR points this way and this way. And
yeah, or it comes up and down, back and forth.
and
Yeah,
they put in a call to the airport and say, what's going on with this?
exactly.
Yeah.
But the workaround for that, rather than having this competing signal issue, would simply be to have an inside man at the Maputo airport who could, during the time that you knew that the president's plane was going to be coming by a certain area, flipped off the switch. So now you turn on the decoy. The decoy runs for a certain amount of time until you can confirm that the plane is turned, and then you flip on the real one again and you turn off the decoy. That also would solve the problem that I had with the decoy, which is if the decoy was running, it should have caught more planes. It should have drawn in more planes than just this one.
Well, yeah, there were other planes. The other thing about it is this little conspiracy requires an amazing amount of coordination. Somebody was where did they leave from? It was
I think it was Mbala.
yeah. So they had to have somebody at Mbala Airport to let them know when the plane took off and headed south. They would have known. They would have had a fair, approximate idea of what the airspeed of it would be. So they'd know when it was approaching. It's objective.
That so far isn't all that complex.
No, but they had to have a guy at that airport to provide them with that information. They had to have a guy at Maputo Airport to flip off the switch, and then they had to have these guys running. I mean, this is a well-greased operation. It's amazing.
Actually, Joe, can I cut off part of that plan for you?
Yeah, what's that?
They made contact with air traffic control, and then they made their turn.
Yeah.
So that it could be as simple as they initiated the handshake of "Hi, we're here," and somebody says, "Turn it on, turn it off,"
Yeah.
and they flip the switches right then. Plane turns. They know the crew is probably not going to continue to monitor the VOR, and they turn it back off once they've confirmed that they've made their turn.
Yeah,
I mean, that simplifies the number of people involved.
I suppose
you don't have to start
bit.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah, but and then I guess they could turn it off, and then they could start their truck up and get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Because you got a plane heading right for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
You know what? The other way that this could very well have gone, though, again, this is a little more difficult when it comes to the decoy or the false VOR readings, is, if you remember, I talked about that the signals, when they're pointing due north, they're in phase, perfectly in phase, and the farther they are out tells you where you are in that 360 degrees. It is entirely possible that instead of having a dummy VOR over the border, they instead manipulated the VOR on site to twist it, essentially. So rather than everything starting in phase at true north, it started in phase at, let's say, 37 degrees off of true north.
And is that something that's possible to be done?
I don't know. I imagine that it is, though I've never heard of it being done, because it's a very simple system, but I don't know how easy it is